Hi, good morning, and welcome to our Graphite Roundtable. I'm joined today by some experts in the field, and we're going to be answering all your questions about graphite and speaking about the market today. We have Christopher Nicholson, Managing Director, Head of Research at ACF Equity Research, Stefan Bernstein, CEO of GreenRock Strategic Materials, which is developing the Amistock project in Greenland, and also Mike Ralston, CEO of Blencoe Resources, which is developing the Orem Cross project in Uganda. Before we start, I suppose it would be timely for us to speak about what is graphite. It takes many forms, and maybe we could go through the role in lithium-ion batteries, which is the highest growing sector of the market. And perhaps the difference between natural and synthetic graphite. Christopher, maybe you could start on that, and then we could hear from Stefan and Mike on where graphite comes in different markets.
Yeah, sure. So you've got three forms of graphite, and flake is the one that's most important. I suppose you've got four if you include artificial graphite. But flake is the most important because it has the highest purity, and therefore it's the most useful in terms of the broadest selection of applications, and so the majority of the value in the market. And that is because many of the applications require 99.9% or higher purity. If you're looking at applications in nuclear, and I suspect Stefan and Mike are going to talk about that in terms of demand curve, those applications require 99.999%, so essentially 100% pure graphite. And this really is the central application. But what's important about it is that you've got both graphite and graphene is essentially a sheet of graphite at the molecular level. Graphite is a precursor for graphene as well. So graphite mining feeds both of those channels, which is graphite itself and graphene. And it's the electrical properties, it's the inert nature, and it's the shock resistance and heat shock resistance that make it such a versatile material. And its major uses are in the energy sector, and essentially in automobiles. I think I may have missed a few things there, but obviously Stefan and Mike will talk because they have to sell this stuff. So
I think, Siobhan, what I'd add is that there's a traditional market, and that traditional market is dominated, I guess, by refractories. There's expandable graphite that goes into things like flame retardants, because it has the properties that allow it to expand, as expandability would suggest. But lining steel foundries, anything that requires the heat resistance and the conductivity that Christopher was talking about. So there is a traditional market that's a pretty big market, but the one that's, I suppose, getting most of the attention at the moment is the use of graphite as a non-replaceable input into lithium-ion batteries via the anode. And we can obviously talk a little bit about that going forward.
Siobhan, I think it's worth adding with respect to Mike's comment there that the refractories segment is 30 to 35% of revenues for graphite. And whilst the exciting growth part is definitely EVs and utility scale batteries, that is a very stable cash flow business. I think Stefan and Mike would probably confirm from their point of view. As again, they're at the sharp end, they have to get the cash in.
And I suppose the thing with graphite as well is that even though it's got these growth markets of lithium ion and it's got the stable markets of refractory, we have seen that market share come down over the last few years. Graphite has always been used in vehicles, in brake fluids and in different parts of vehicles. It's always been a very important component of that market anyway, just used in different ways. Stefan, would you like to add anything about the uses of graphite?
Yes, I suppose that in addition to the use of graphite for lithium-ion batteries, there's another electrical or use of graphite, you could say, as a bipolar plates in fuel cells, which was going to be probably the main way to store energy in trucks and other heavy vehicles in the coming years. So we're looking at a typical like 20% weight of the fuel cells to be made up of graphite. So that's important, of course. And then I would like to add also that natural graphite, I think Christopher touched on this also, that it comes in different, because it's a natural product, it comes in a quite range of qualities, both in terms of the inherited impurities, that is the types of minerals that forms impurities. That's specific for each deposit, but also the range of flake sizes. And some are characterized by having very minute particles, very, very small flake sizes of graphite that is like microcrystalline or amorphous graphite deposits, and then up to very large flakes, ending up with vein type deposits, which are smaller but very high purity and also very large flakes. And typically for producing the anodes for EV batteries, one use the relatively fine grain but still coarse crystalline, not amorphous graphite, which is in the minus, that is less than 0.1 millimeter grain size fraction.
How is demand being shaped by these emerging technologies, and in terms of those different markets you talk about, in terms of large flake and the smaller flake? How is the graphite demand being shaped by electric vehicles and I suppose grid scale batteries, because they both go into those?
Siobhan, I think it might be worth teeing this up in terms of just three buckets for the supply schedule, and then perhaps Mike and Stefan can talk to those and give their views on that. So we would see it anyway from a research house perspective, as you've got these three buckets, which is electric vehicles for the growth. You've got electric vehicles and refractories, which would go into one bucket because they're kind of well established. Then you've got a new growth area, which is utility scale batteries. And then finally, you've got what I would call specialized uses with inelastic demand schedules. So that would be things like high temperature gas cooled reactors, molten salt reactors, backed up by the US and China, for example, having large scale, fairly certain policies about distributed micronuclear generation.
Interesting. And then if we're talking about those different markets, where is the supply coming from?
Stefan, sorry, you wanted to say something?
I would just like to add one thing in terms of the utilizing graphite. One of the growing industries, also particularly at the moment, is the use of which is aside from anode material and electrical uses, is use of graphene and graphite in various parts of the defense industries, which is a segment which is obviously growing quite significantly now. But it's also a segment which is quite difficult to obtain the specific knowledge about what type of materials being used. But NATO just released a list of critical raw materials for the various defense systems, and graphite is one out of two raw materials that is highly critical for nearly all of the defense systems.
Is the defense industry, the demand coming from the defense industry, will that eat into any of that energy transition demand?
No, I don't think so, because the quantities are very small. It's very specialized. It pays a lot more, but the quantities are much smaller. So I think touching on what you just asked a minute ago about where's it coming from, every project is different. We all have unique chemical characteristics in our graphite, both in the ground and once it's processed. But we also have different flake size mixes. And to try and sort of keep it at a reasonably high level so people can understand without us getting too technical, You have small flakes and you have large flakes, and they go into different end uses, different applications. And us as prospective miners are looking to try and find off-takers for all of it, because obviously we want to sell all of our product. So we are constantly hunting around for different markets that will take product, whether it be the small flake products, whether it be the larger flake products, and everything in between. And we will obviously be selling all of the above, because it's very, very unusual for a project to just have all small flakes or all large flakes. It doesn't happen. So there's a huge range of different off-takers that we could sit here and talk for hours and hours about, but there's significantly more demand in the EV space going forward at this stage for the small flake products, and that's definitely where most forecasts are showcasing much, much larger growth in demand going forward. And, obviously that's where we're all looking to try to expand projects, because we need critical mass to make them work, and obviously looking to expand into those markets and get the off-takers there.
So, Siobhan, I think it's worth summarizing what part of what really makes it attractive, apart from it getting critical mineral status, which I'm sure we're going to discuss later on, the implications of that. I think the idea here is that you've got a commodity or a critical mineral that is not subject only to commodity price movements, because as the guys have said, you've got these areas which are specialist, which are demand inelastic, so they are largely speaking price insensitive. You've got already a stable cash flow model with respect to the refractories product, which is needed in blast furnaces, electric arc furnaces, which is the future, and is needed in the linings of a lot of high quality molds, which are used in construction. So you've got this fixed revenue stream that comes through as, if you like, your cash yield. You've got this incredible growth sector, which is EV. So to put that in perspective, you expected to sell about 17 million EVs in 2025. That's probably going to rise to about 25% of total car sales by 2030. And each one of those takes, I think it's 50 to 70 kilograms, which just off the cuff is about 100,000 metric tons, probably, just for cars of graphite. So you've got growth, you've got stable cash flows, and then you've got these new innovative technologies with these specialized inelastic demands, which means you're not subject in quite the same way to price volatility of commodities. And I think those are interesting characteristics. They are shared by some other commodities, but I think graphite has one of the, and graphene in communications, for example, has one of the brightest futures in that respect.
Interesting. And so are you seeing a great deal of demand for the products that your projects are going to offer to the market then?
Let me quickly step in, Stefan, give you a moment to think about it. There's a process, Siobhan, and it's I guess loosely called pre-qualification. And what that means is that the end users need to understand what the characteristics of our graphite are, as processed to a concentrate and ultimately as purified graphite, in order to understand whether they want to buy it or not. So they need us to not just to give them lab scale samples, but bulk samples of all of the products that we want to sell, and then they'll take it away and do their testing themselves, and ultimately come back and say, yes, you've got what we want, or no, you don't have what we want, and then you go into the offtake negotiations, discussions from there. So it's a much more complicated process than just selling nickel or copper or lead or something into a London metal market, and you just say, right, we've got to get it a certain spec and it's sold. These are negotiations that have to be handled one-on-one with specific markets, and we're talking Western markets, we're talking Asian markets, and then specific products as well. So it gets a little bit complicated in a sense, but you have to go through this qualification process. And we've seen a number of companies that haven't done that successfully falling over, because they've literally got to a point where they feel they're ready for production, or even in some cases have gone into building something and they don't yet have the means by which they can sell it. And obviously that's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, I'll let Stefan talk a little bit, but that's my 2 cents worth.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I think I'll add to that presently all battery producers, not only in Europe, but also in North America and elsewhere, are sourcing all of their anode material from Chinese producers, suppliers. So, which means, of course, that you could say that presently there's not really like an alternative market for if there were such a thing as a European domestic production of this material. You kind of have to squeeze yourself into the market. I think there are several ways. Of course, political statements that go into the direction of creating more domestic supplies of some of these critical raw materials, particularly anode material. But at the moment, the battery manufacturers are quite happy to source their material in China, where they know they can have the deliveries of consistent quality and at a price that is really admittedly hard to compete with. However, I think that's a very important point also here, that it is possible to enter that market, because European OEMs and battery producers do realize much more now than they did about a year ago that supply safety or supply security is actually worth something. And so, as Mike mentioned, if you can demonstrate that you can produce the quality that matches what they presently can source in China, then there's definitely an interested market.
I suppose that moves us quite nicely onto the geopolitical landscape that the market is facing at the moment. We've obviously seen over the last couple of months tariffs coming in, and this almost US-China battle to have the highest tariffs, and there's a scramble also from the EU to try and secure supply as well. All of which sounds like a very kind of nice background for an emerging producer of such a critical material.
I think, again, Siobhan, it's probably worth setting the scene a bit here with a couple of numbers. So China currently produces maybe, I think it's 65% of graphite. I'm sure Stefan and Mike will correct me if I've got that wrong, and is somewhere between 90 and 95% of beneficiation. So in other words, processing. And the key, we would say the key element would be the spherical purified graphite, which is going into most energy storage technologies. And so you have a situation whereby if you have 145% tariffs against your main supplier, it's, that is a bit of a problem. So therefore, what we think will end up happening, and we're not saying anything particularly new here, but just to distill it, you're going to have three blocks. You'll have US, possibly North America, if you include Canada, if they can make friends again. You will have a European Union region, which will probably include UK, and then you'll have Japan. That's our current view, but happy to be corrected or have other insights into that.
Yeah, I'll just add that actually over the past year, even though we've seen a lot of statements about the Chinese control on the market, it's actually gone the other way over the past. So the number you just mentioned, Christoph, with 60-something% of the market covered by China for production of natural flake graphite, is actually up to 80% now. And we're looking at 98% of the market for anode material. So it's gone in the wrong direction from 23 to 24. I think that we will, very briefly on the tariffs, I mean, that's completely unpredictable, of course, what will happen there. I think that in many ways, I mean, presently there's no production in North America of anode material. So if you hit the market with big tariffs with imports of anode material, you're going to hurt your car industry. So something is going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to add that China has already forced the Chinese companies to get an export permit to export purified graphite, So every single time graphite is sent out of the country, they have to go through a process by which they get permission. And that permission can be turned off pretty quickly. So, there are some people who are suggesting that one of the weapons that China may use in retaliation to tariffs could be the banning of the export of purified graphite. And as Stefan said, it's about 98%. So it kind of brings the energy transition to a grinding halt if they cannot export. And just be aware that the Chinese companies are not all state-owned enterprises. So there are private companies there that have a huge appetite to continue to export, because they are obviously supplying that international markets, particularly in Japan and South Korea. And so they definitely want to continue, but it becomes a geopolitical weapon. And we don't know where that's going, but it does create risk and it does create opportunity. But make no mistake that the OEMs, the end users, the people who want to buy purified graphite would love to see purified graphite produced outside of China. They would pay a premium, and they would definitely be keen to literally queue up for anyone who can do that. It's not as simple. You don't just go into a bookstore and find a book how to purify graphite and suddenly you're an expert. These Chinese companies that do it have taken 20, 30 years of learning to get it right. But there is an opportunity for anybody that does deliver purified graphite outside of China to create some sort of, definitely create market demand for that product, but also to possibly get premiums for that as well in terms of pricing. So everything creates opportunity as well as risk.
I think, Siobhan, we should touch here for the benefits of investors on artificial graphite, because they may be thinking it's some sort of substitute for natural flake. So there are a few points to make on that. One is that artificial graphite is basically made from a petroleum product, so petroleum coke, etc. You have to heat it to about 2,500 to 3,000 degrees C, so it has a huge carbon footprint in comparison to natural flake graphite, which is not very ESG friendly. And of course, it's more expensive. I think it's something like 2 to 3 times more expensive than natural flake. Is that about right? Something like that. But Tesla use artificial graphite. Point is, though, if you wanted to set up artificial graphite chains, you've got two issues. First of all, natural flake is getting cheaper and easier to process, so the cost differential is coming down. And then the other thing is that the CO2 footprint of artificial is so high that all the sort of social and political pressures are pushing against it as opposed to encouraging it. And finally, if you want to set up a supply chain from scratch, probably 5 to 7 years. Would that be fair, Stefan, Mike?
Yeah, Christopher, my understanding, and having run around China a fair bit over the last while, is that there are particular factories that are set up to take synthetic, and there are particular factories that are set up to take more natural. And the ones that are there for synthetic have been set up. They're not going to change it, so they're always going to be in there for that, and ditto for the ones with for natural. So sitting here trying to say, we're going to take them out, they're going to take us out. For me, there's enough demand for both. And there probably is, around about a 50-50 split ultimately in any battery of both. But if you take the sort of numbers that we're looking at in terms of demand going forward, and you try to sort of envisage how many mines it requires to actually deliver that as natural, there's plenty. I don't see my peers as as competition. They ultimately, where there's enough demand for all of us to fulfill. But synthetic is always going to be around for sure.
Yeah, I think, you can summarize, I think the differences between synthetic graphite and natural flake graphite as anode material in that synthetic graphite typically has a better consistency because it's, man-made. And therefore it contributes with longevity of the battery or more cycles, charging cycles. But then on the other hand, because the natural flake graphite anode material has a better crystallinity, that's to the capacity of the battery, its ability to hold more charge. So in that sense, typically battery makers like to use a mix. The exact mix is something that is dictated by experience and what performance the battery is demanded to have, and also then of course the pricing. So when natural flake graphite anode material is a lot less expensive than synthetic anode material, then you have a larger mix in and vice versa. I like to add to what Christopher just said, namely that the production of synthetic anode material is associated with a huge CO2 footprint. Even compared to anode material produced in China, it has about 4 to 5 times a higher CO2 footprint. If compared to a natural flake graphite anode material produced in our part of the world, it's probably more like 10 times a higher footprint.
And I suppose that is a huge consideration if you're looking at batteries for EVs, having that net zero or at least something closer to it would be a consideration for OEMs rather than something so carbon intensive. How important is ESG in your considerations for your projects?
I think it's very important. We're seeing it from two angles. One is the OEMs, who we're told are going to be upstream audited, as Stefan says, so they're going to be very interested in where it's come from and what the situation is within those mines. But it's also from a funding perspective. A lot of the banks and other funders, be it debt or equity, are very interested in this space and in this ESG and obviously wanting to know that the project is very compliant. So, both of them, it being offtake and funding, are probably the two most important parts of our probably the two biggest challenges for us. And so, having a project that is ESG compliant and can stand out obviously adds another tick in a box, which is very important going forward.
May I just add to that, Mike? I think you're perfectly right there. But also we see, for instance, from the EU, there's an emphasis on the ESG component of a lot of raw materials. There's the carbon border adjustment mechanism that is potentially adding extra costs to imported raw materials that do not meet the low CO2 requirements. So I think that there's both the political angle, where we see a growing emphasis on ESG, but certainly also in the market, from the market perspective, from the OEMs, that they like to, of course, to present to the market cars, for instance, which have a lower CO2 impact and are also produced from raw materials with an emphasis on high ESG standards.
I'm just conscious of time now. We've got some questions that have come in from the audience. Sorry, Christopher.
Siobhan, I think it's worth just quickly summarizing the analytical perspective on ESG, which is entirely numbers driven. So from our point of view, we see it as a good thing because in the end, it reduces risk, which reduces the weighted average cost of capital, which means that your IRRs are lower, so more projects come into fruition. It does that by creating culture and producing data that can be measured.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Christopher. That's an important point to make, especially for any investors that are watching to understand that side of it. So we have got a couple of questions that I'll just put to the three of you. The first one's come in, and it is, what is the biggest barrier to getting mining projects off the ground? That's probably one for the ones getting projects off the ground.
Are we just talking about mining projects, or we're talking about graphite projects specifically?
Well, these are specific to this roundtable, so it would be, I would say, answer as a graphite project.
I mean, no question for us, funding is the biggest issue. And I guess we all face the problem that our market caps have been largely whacked and destroyed to some extent. So we're all trying to capital raise of lower market caps than we would hope for, which makes it more difficult. But just sourcing funding, both for feasibility studies and other work, as well as ultimately production, is by far the biggest challenge. I think going through that pre-qualification process to find offtake is definitely another challenge. But that's obviously a little bit more in our hands and ultimately dictated by the kind of characteristics in terms of the purification of the end product. So for me, funding is by far the biggest challenge. But we're seeing a shift in that to some extent. There's a lot more interest happening now than there was a few years ago, and I think that's going to change going forward. As we've talked about, there's a geopolitical landscape that seems to be creating a different discussion, and hopefully with that it brings more funding opportunities for all of us.
Does seem to be shifting. Stefan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would agree 100% to that. I do see also now a growing understanding with the politicians and decision makers that in order to make these raw materials projects happen, then there needs to be some kind of a support mechanism put in place. Simply because the market itself, it does react and it will react, but it reacts a lot slower and doesn't react on the demand from the decision makers. So therefore, if we want to have a secure supply chain of some of these critical raw materials, we do need to give them that financial push to make them happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking through the questions and we've answered them pretty well during this discussion. So now I'm just going to ask each of you what you think is next for the graphite market and for this space that we've spoken about. I'll start with who's on my screen first, and I'll start with you, Christopher, if that's okay, and then then you can move on. Just a quick summary.
What's next? Well, I think we've touched on some of the technological innovations that are coming down the track. So just to repeat, you've got nuclear, you've got modular nuclear, which means smaller reactors and a lot more of them, a specialist area. You've got communications technologies with high frequency communications, which require graphite being the precursor. So at that level, at the technological level, that's what you've got. And I think what's coming next is really how investors identify which firms to invest in, and there are many issues here, but one of them certainly is each entity involved in graphene and graphite needs to be able to distinguish itself. We believe the money is there. The problem is that both institutional and retail investors are looking at the board and thinking, how do I make a decision? And it's about standing out, and that's research, it's PR, it's communications, it's all of these things, branding, the whole lot. There are other issues. Regulation has to change in Europe, and there are plans about that if you want to create a supply chain in Europe. That does not touch miners explicitly at this point, but overall, that is a future change that's going to have to happen. It's going to happen in Japan, and it's going to have to happen in the US. And then after that, which I'd like to touch on if we have time, Siobhan, is a very general approach for investors about how to think about investing in this type of space.
Maybe we can come back to that. I'll let Mike answer now, just conscious of time. And
look, I don't know what's next in terms of the macro market. I'll leave that to the people who are at the cutting edge and finding different products. What I know is that we've got a very high quality of end product that's been proven both in many different labs as well as in bulk sample testing. So we're getting a pretty good feedback from the OEMs and all the different end users, the off-takers that we've been talking to, which is great because ultimately our job is to try and build a project that can get up. And one of the key components of that is finding off-takers that can speak for selling, a large quantity, because make no mistake, most of the graphite projects that have got up of late are still at a very small pilot type of stage. And it's very difficult to make a lot of money and justify the capital expenditure if you're only sitting at a very small quantity sold. So everybody's facing the same issue, that they've got to get critical mass. They've got to be able to then find a means by which they can sell, 50,000 tons of concentrate a year, which not many people are doing in the world, I can tell you that. And so everybody's sitting, fighting for that space, fighting for those markets, trying to make sure that they can get it sold. And ultimately, we're finding different markets, different parties that are in those markets, and we're having to talk to all of them. We're having to go through a very long and involved process of getting all of them samples, and obviously they go and test them, etc., etc. So it's not as simple as producing a bar of gold, which I've done in the past, and you go and sell it to a mint. And it's not as easy as doing some of the base metals as well. But once you're in with an end user and they like what you've got, I think that, you know, you found somebody that obviously wants what you've got. I think it's a long-term relationship if you can show continuity. And then the next step is to get funded and ultimately to get into production, because I think there's enough space for all of us. And I really do. And I think that if we can just break through the barriers and try and get a couple of projects into production, will actually help all of us, because the market wants to see some successes. It's only seen a lot of failures to date. And anyone who's successful will start to create a mushroom effect, where it sort of goes on to the next one and the next one. And people, you know, we all look at our peers and we can find out what they're doing well and how they're doing it. And obviously in some ways copy what they're doing if it makes sense as strategy, etc. So I wish everybody is doing it well. I really do. And I hope that we see a lot more success in this industry so that we can all benefit together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. Stefan, do you have anything to add to that? It's quite coherent.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to add that that because graphite is such a versatile raw material, as Christopher also described, it sees uses across EVs, stationary energy storages, defense industries, electronics, steel industry, and many others. The market is quite stable. It's growing. We don't need to address just like one single market, which may or may not fail. I don't think the EV market will fail in terms of lithium batteries and so forth. But it's just important to understand that graphite is such a used raw material that I think and all predictions show that the world market demand is going to grow in the coming years. And I also like to add that in terms of the use for lithium-ion batteries, for instance, recycling of this material is quite difficult. It's possible, but probably not as to be reused as anode material simply because of the specifications and so forth. It might be used for or find users for as a carburizer for steel industries and others. So, I mean, it's not like we, in a few years' time, will see a huge recycling of used batteries. So there will be a constant demand. And finally, I also like to add that although that the battery industry today is dominated, obviously, by Chinese companies, also here in Europe, and obviously they all source their anode material in China, I think that there will be, I see signs that there's a shift towards a willingness also to source some of the raw materials in closer from closer producers, even from Chinese battery companies. So we will be seeing a shift towards a more domestic market.
So, Christopher, perhaps we can discuss a little bit about how investors can approach the sector.
Siobhan, yes, I think that's a really great question. And I'm going to do it in general terms to give them an approach. So in the simplest, most distilled terms, there are two ways of looking at this. First of all, there are three types of company that you could consider investing in simple terms. And then you have to decide what your risk profile is. So let me just summarize those in two buckets. You have got pure play, graphite, miners and explorers. So that's all they're doing. You have got diversified miners and producers, so explorers and producers who have other elements that they're also, or compounds, but they have graphite within their mix. And then finally, you have integrated businesses. So they might be exploring, they might be developing, they might be producing, and they may also be producing the end product, the beneficiated product for batteries. We would even extend that beyond and say they could, in the future, they could get into producing the batteries themselves. Then you have to decide what's your risk profile. Well, if you go for juniors or small or micro caps, the point is you then have the opportunities for 10x returns and so on and so forth. If you go for the larger players, you're likely to have less exposure to graphite itself, but you have a lower risk profile, and as such, you will have a lower return, but your capital probably is at less risk. So this is really the way to think about it.
I think that, can I just add one little bit to that, Christopher? I think specifically in terms of graphite, I think there are three things that really matter, and investors need to look closely at them. The first is operating costs. At the end of the day, unfortunately, the miners don't make as much profit in this space as do the downstream processing people. So particularly if you have got a lot of small flake product that you're selling, because that obviously goes for less. So it's very important that you're at the lowest end of the operating cost curve. And anyone who's in a high cost jurisdiction is in a bit of trouble, because they're going to struggle to make the margins that justify the projects. And I don't want to point out anyone in particular, but I'm just saying that in general. The second one is capital costs. At the end of the day, if you're having to put in an awful lot of infrastructure to build a project and your capital costs are huge, it puts a lot more pressure on, firstly, to actually raise it, and ultimately to repay it, and obviously to service the debt as well. And that creates a lot more problems and challenges as well. And then the final piece for me is purity of end product. If you've got a project that doesn't have high quality end product, the market is probably going to buy it, but it'll just buy it at a huge discount. And again, it goes back to margins and profitability and ultimately having the success in the project. So for investors, you want to be looking at all three of those key characteristics within every project that you look at. And if any one of them is missing, make no mistake, there's challenges ahead for that project going forward. So that's my little piece. But it's not, doesn't mean just if you've got all three of those that you are going to succeed. It just helps a lot.
I think with the markets the way they are, we're all looking at the OPEX and the CAPEX in these kind of junior projects, and also jurisdictions are important, and politics, and it all comes in, doesn't it?
Your jurisdictions is extremely important. Depending on which country you operate in, the mining permitting could take decades. So it eventually could kill even the best project, of course.
Well, we've given everyone lots to think about here, I think, and I don't know that we've done it justice in the amount of time we've had, but it's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today.